Sabah everybody and welcome back. The Z Fold 3 and the Z Fold 4 are very similar. There is actually a minor set of changes that we saw from last year to this year. This is definitely an iterative update, meaning there's really not a big requirement for somebody that went with the 3 to go to the 4, unless there are certain things that you care about when it comes down to the experience of a foldable from Samsung. And I'm talking about all the way since the beginning of the foldables available from Samsung, from the original OG, the Fold 2, the 3, and the 4. There are some subtle differences in here that may compel you to upgrade to the Z Fold 4. This is TK, this is the Z Fold 3 and the Z Fold 4, and should you? Like and subscribe, and make sure you hit that bell icon so that you're always notified whenever we have new videos on the channel. Okay, so we're going to start off by talking about the fact that overall the specifications are very similar. The display that we have here, although very similar on numbers, and let's go ahead and turn it on. I'm going to unlock this device. We'll give it a second. Okay, we'll give it a second there. I'm going to do the same here, and we're going to unlock. And what I mean by this, I aligned the picture at the top to be the exact same configuration. So you'll notice right there, on the left, on the right, both start the same. But the picture on the bottom actually goes a little bit further down. I'm actually able to see slightly more information on this, even though technically they're the same width. There is actually more viewable space on the brand new Z Fold 4 than we have on the Z Fold 3. Now, it's not night and day. This is going to be not earth-shattering experience, but if you've ever had that concern where you felt like this was too constrained, this is actually going to give you a little bit better experience. So you can definitely see the color representation and what we have in there. On top of the fact that the actual phone is actually a little bit lighter. So they went from 271 grams here to 263. It's noticeable, but honestly, when you have them in a case, I really beg to differ. There really isn't a big way for you to tell that this is not the same device. The camera stack on the back is definitely a big improvement from what we got last year, and that's because we went from a triple camera setup that used to basically feature a 12 megapixel as their primary sensor to now a 50 megapixel sensor that's going to be the primary sensor, and there is a big difference in image quality when you're going there. Now, we're not using, obviously, this is not going to be the Note 22 Ultra or the S22 Ultra cameras. We're talking more like of an S22 Plus camera experience, but it's definitely much better than what we have in here. We're able to bring in more light, and of course the telephoto lens that we have in here now goes up to 3 times X as opposed to 2 times X, although we technically lost a couple of megapixels on that sensor. So a primary 50, a 12 ultra wide, a 10 megapixel telephoto. Well, basically it's going to be the 12 megapixel telephoto, and what we have is a 10 megapixel front camera, a 4 megapixel in-display camera, and that's going to be pretty much the same experience we have back with the Z Fold 3. So what you're noticing here essentially is an in-display or underneath display camera that is present in the same spot. So if we're going to say bring it up and look into it, it actually does show up. It's not very well hidden, but it's definitely nice. My thoughts on this would have been very nice for them to just take out this camera. There really is no reason for it to be there. If you're doing a video call and you want to really get the best benefit out of this device, you definitely want to be able to put it up in more of a prop mode or give us better camera experience. The sticking with the 4 megapixel camera downgrade from the Z Fold 2 is one of the biggest things that drove me a little bit around there. Battery size, we're looking at the same battery capacity, not much of a difference there. Same charging capacity, so we're not getting much of a difference there. And as far as camera experience, I do want to share with you guys real quick some examples of what the experience is. From the same standpoint, when we're talking about 3 times over 2 times, this is the type of zoom range that you're gaining. Basically, camera works really nice. Now, I do want to say this much. For some reason, I think because of the background and the color and the camera is trying to basically focus on, it's making it look like the picture on the device looks either overblown or not even enough detail. So I'm going to actually show you guys those pictures right on your display right now. And again, those are a couple of low light images, outdoor images, as well as the ability of just sharing with you guys the experience of what does actually the improvement is. Is it really tangible to be able to use the new camera system on the Z Fold 4? Now, it goes without saying is a better camera sensor will give us a better experience. For the longest time, Samsung has been holding back the foldable experience to somewhat of an almost like this is a foldable first and the camera is more of an addition thing, making it sound like we don't really need good cameras on a foldable device. And other companies have been basically leapfrogging over Samsung when it comes down to this experience. So I'm really happy to see that Samsung finally focused on this and gave us a 50 megapixel main sensor. I'm also hoping that we see more with the Z Fold 5 or any other generations that we see from a foldable from Samsung. The Z Flip also got a very similar experience. They stuck to the same sensor, maybe with a higher, I think it's like a 1.8 micron over a 1.4. So definitely better low light performance, but not necessarily a better or bigger sensor to give us better images. They're okay. The camera performance on the Fold 3 is definitely not a bad experience. But for me, because I have access to other devices, I will say that I typically didn't use the Z Fold4 as or Z Fold3 as my main camera for content creation. And that's the flip side with the Z Fold4, because I'm actually using it with the 50 megapixel camera to be able to shoot content, edit content, and produce it, and leveraging the fact that we do have a more powerful processor, and actually a processor that is not as, I guess, heat generating or power hungry. So the 888 and the 8 Gen 1 both featured a basically, the performance was there, but it was also providing us a very high power draw. So as you used your device got warmer, and of course, things didn't really work the way you want them to be after some time. One thing to keep in mind overall on the big difference between how Samsung is approaching these devices is actually very clear. What we had last year with the 888 is a performance mode called Enhanced Processing. Now, this is available on the S22 Ultra. Just keep in mind, this is not something very long ago. So anything prior to the 8 Plus Gen 1, at least to this date, seems like it's running with an Enhanced Processing mode. Well, what it means essentially is that the device is actually running in a throttle mode most of the time. And if you want to be able to get the full performance, you need to understand that this is going to consume more battery, and it then gives you the full performance. And this is probably something to do with the fact that when they were doing those, benchmark numbers kind of fudging. But either way, this is something that you needed to know was there. If you didn't know that it's either there, or if you actually needed to know that the actual option was sitting here, you never knew any different, and you were running the basically the Z Fold3 in a throttled mode, and of course the battery lasted you longer, which obviously there's a purpose for that. They don't just do that for the sake of just not giving you the full power. What we get here with the 8 Plus Gen 1 or the Z Fold4, we no longer have enhanced processing. This option does not exist here. This is not something that I'm just choosing not to use. Now we have a couple of options. We have standard mode, which essentially provides the recommended balance between the processing speed, battery life, and cooling efficiency. So it still kind of indicates that this is technically somewhat of a throttled experience. It's not a full experience, but it does sound like the standard should be full potential. Everything runs at the best performance. Light is more of a power savings, which is what typically this was running at. So Samsung is changing their approach into this. I wish it was a little bit clearer into the way they did it and the way they're providing us the control, letting us know what is the performance. When I run Geekbench on both of them, I do get slightly different numbers. On standard here, I am getting about 1280 as opposed to what we get here, closer to around the 1100 from last year. But keep in mind, again, they're adjusting their performance, they're adjusting what they're doing, but at the end of the day, both of these devices are way overpowered into what we need in 2022. The display does run at 120 Hertz internally. You have the S Pen configuration. All of those things run pretty much the same. The optimizations that we're getting on, the Z Fold4 will ultimately basically make their way to the Z Fold3. Maybe not obviously at the same time, but we will see them. So maybe to bring the story kind of a little bit back to an end. Does the Z Fold4 provide us enough of a change over the Z Fold3 to make you jump from one to the other? Honestly, unless you're in a position where you really need to have the latest and greatest, I don't think that that's going to be something that I would recommend. I think the Z Fold3 on its own, still a year in, performs just as good. I have the ability of throttling the experience up or keeping it at the throttled experience, and that helps me with the battery life. I mean, the 888 is way more powerful than what we need, and the 8 Gen 1 or the 8 Plus Gen 1 is again in that same position. So it's a generational upgrade, but we have the TSMC configuration and improvements there, which I really feel like help us basically get a better experience. Is it tangible from a 3 to the 4? Not necessarily. From a 2 or a 1 generation Z Fold? Absolutely. Now, if you're a new person into foldables, and obviously in the US we don't have a lot of options, but we do have obviously Samsung's experience between a flip and a fold. The flip is really considered to be a pocket communicator. There's a lot of core things in there. There's an external display that pretty much functions as kind of like a smartwatch on a phone. And the overall experience, I feel like it's really more geared toward a general user. It still has the 8 Gen 1, it still has a lot of power in it, but it's not as powerful as what we get with the Z Fold4. We have the S Pen configuration, we have DeX that's built into the Fold, but not the Flip. There's obviously also a screen mirroring, a whole bunch of different things in there that I feel like are more focused towards a power user. And I feel like that's where the Fold comes in. Now, there's also some conversations going on. Is this an upgrade from the S22 Ultra? I'll say this, and I'll say this very clearly. It is not in the same ballpark. It is not a competitor to the Note series or the S22 Ultra. These are two different devices. If you're a person that likes the Note and you appreciate what the Note does with the built-in S Pen and the functionalities and obviously the rectangular shape of that device, you're not going to be jumping over to a Fold. This is obviously for somebody that likes to have the latest innovative tech, or I would say be part of somewhat of a beta program in a sense, but essentially on the bleeding edge. That's what foldables are. The 3 to the 4 is really a minor update. It's something that I can appreciate now that I've been using these devices since the first generation, and I like it, but I don't know if it was really worth it for me to trade in my Z Fold 3 to go to the 4. From a 2 or a 1, absolutely. This is definitely going to drive it really well, and of course you're going to enjoy it. Stereo speakers, flexible experience. They did do that memory upgrade, which I feel like they've been doing it since the beginning of the year, where they're bumping us up, so I did get the 512 gig storage. Also, I will say this from based on my experience on the Note 22 Ultra, unless there's a specific reason and you really need to get it through your carrier, I recommend you getting the unlocked model of devices from Samsung, as you get the most flexibility and least concern, and also your updates will come in much faster than getting a carrier version that typically have to go through the carrier approval before they come to your device. Also, carriers typically will add things to those updates. That's probably what slows them down a little bit. So at the end of the day, the question that I asked at the beginning of the video, or even in the thumbnail, should you? If you're coming from a 3 to a 4, I don't think that's the right solution. First time coming into a foldable and you have a good device to be able to trade in and take advantage of some of the bonuses that Samsung's offering, I would absolutely say go for the 4. If you want to save some money, find yourself a good deal on the Z Fold 3. Seriously, this device is not bad, and it's not like it suddenly stops booting Android. It's a very powerful device and it does very well. The camera is just not as good as what we get on the Z Fold 4, especially at least on the main sensor. The internal display camera is honestly non-usable. I do love the fact that on both of these devices, you can definitely launch the camera and with a touch of a button, see and use the best cameras on this device as your main cameras, because you have basically a front-facing display on the front as well as on the back. And that's actually very limited to pretty much foldables on Samsung. No other device Samsung produces today offers that. So I hope you found this video helpful. My hope is that I answered some of your questions. I'm still in the process of working on my review on the Z Fold 4. I've had it for literally about 5 or 6 days now. And I don't want to jump in and start calling these reviews, because it is not a review till you live in with the phone. So I'm going to be traveling with this to IFA next week, and I'm also going to be traveling this to a Sony event. So this is actually going to live with me and travel with me. And so how does this hold up to what my tried and true S22 Ultra has been able to do for me since the beginning of the year, where I've traveled with this and I've done a couple of events with it as well. So thank you very much for the support. Make sure to like and subscribe so you know when my next videos come up. But otherwise, I'll see you in the next one.